Welcome back everyone to the video, and today we're talking about 5 NFL teams I feel are being very underrated going to the 2024 NFL season. I'm going to try to keep this video relatively brief because I have more like division focused, team specific videos coming out later on this off season. This is just supposed to be like a pretty brief, short list of teams I feel like are being a bit underrated. Also, just before we get into it, this is not in any like particular order. It's not from like least underrated to most underrated. It's just, in a random order. It's just 5 teams I really feel like are being quite underrated. Starting with the Vikings as number 1, getting right into it. So first off, I do want to say that for the Vikings, I feel like opinions are kind of all over the place. And it really depends on how you feel about their quarterback situation. For JJ McCarthy, it's like, should this guy have been taken in the first round? Other people, it's like perfect scheme fit. He's going to be great. It really kind of varies, I feel like, from what I've seen of how people really feel about JJ McCarthy. For me personally, I honestly am not totally deciding what I think about JJ McCarthy, or Sam Darnold for that matter, but I think there are some things that we just can't ignore when it comes to the offense, at least. And the first thing being the surrounding cast for either of these quarterbacks is very, very good. You have one of, if not the best wide receiver in the entire NFL, with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, who proved to be very good in his rookie year, like one of the touchdown leaders, I believe, last year as a rookie. You bring in Aaron Jones, an excellent running back, an excellent receiving back. You still have Ty Chandler, Hawkinson whenever he's healthy, Brandon Powell, who's a very solid wide receiver number 3, and at that too, a very solid offensive line too. So it's like, for Sam Darnold, if he's going to be starting week 1, this is the best surrounding cast he's had in his entire career, probably by a large margin. So it's like, yeah, is he, the best quarterback in the league? Not really. In my opinion, as far as backups go, he's probably in the upper echelon of backups in the league. He's not that bad, but like if you have him in there if you have him as your backup, I think you can kind of live with that. But still, I would be interested to see how Darnold really does in an offense that is, I don't want to say this stacked, but like there's no, talent's everywhere. Like there's no questions about that. And then for McCarthy, I think the surrounding cast for the same for him, like it's a great situation to be in as a rookie. When you have guys that can help you out of the backfield, like Aaron Jones, like Ty Chandler, great receivers, one of the best, I'm not going to say one of the best, but a top wide receiver duo in the league, I'm sure, with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, assuming Addison continues to perform how he did his rookie year. So I think regardless of who's in there at quarterback, the surrounding cast has to be doing something productive to some degree. We've seen it in Atlanta where quarterback plays kind of held guys like Kyle Pitts back and Drake London back, and it's definitely noticeable, but you still see flashes. I see the Vikings the same way. I think it's impossible to see this offense and have it not produce anything. I think there's just too much talent there, and I feel like they're definitely being underrated a little bit because of their quarterback situation, which is like, in my opinion, I think the question marks around it's being overrated just a little bit. Like, regardless of who's in there, I think they're going to be able to operate the offense in a way that is going to still get them wins. And then the defensive side of the ball, I understand there probably are a little bit of questions here. I know last year, at least going into last year, the Vikings defense was not thought of very highly at all. Brian Flores, though, to his credit, I think did honestly have this defense to be much better than a lot of people thought it would be. A big loss, though, was losing Danielle Hunter in the offseason. It's a big loss for your D-line. You do bring in Jonathan Greenard, who I think is actually kind of swapped, really. Greenard's from the Texans. Hunter goes to the Texans, so you kind of swapped. But I think he's, honestly, you can live with that as a replacement. Greener's not bad at all. You still have Ivan Pace Jr., who's a bit of an unsung hero in that defense. Harrison Phillips is a great defensive tackle. Secondary is a little questionable to me. You still have the veteran Harrison Smith in there. Cameron Bynum, I think, is solid. Byron Murphy Jr., I think, is somewhat solid. Caleb Evans is some of a question mark, at least in my opinion, but I still don't think he's like one of the worst starters in the world. So, in my opinion, you can live with this defense. Like, this is not a defense you're going to throw out there and be worried every single possession. Is it the strongest in the league? No, probably not. But considering, I think, some of the discourse we've had about the Vikings this offseason, I don't think it's going to be as bad as people are maybe expecting if you're not high on the quarterback. If you're high on the quarterback, then this entire section of my video probably makes no sense to you because you're like, well, yeah, I think they're going to be great this year. But if you're not, I do really think that the Vikings deserve a bit more respect than what they're currently being given. And also, they bring in Andrew Van Ginkel as well from the Dolphins last year. I forgot to say that before. To me, I understand if the quarterback play is going to be a big question mark for you, or even just for the Vikings in general. I definitely understand that, but I do feel like JJ McCarthy, if he went to Washington, we'd be having a much different discussion in there. But he went to a team that there's, I mean, talent all over the place. I think it's a pretty good scheme fit as well. He has experience in pro style offenses anyway. So I personally think the fit there is awesome. And I think Darnold, I got to see a lot of him in Carolina, unfortunately. But to be honest, like, he wasn't as bad as ever made him out to be. He's, a very solid runner. And again, for the weapons around him, Darnold has never really had super elite weapons. In Carolina, yes, he did have McCaffrey, he did have DJ Moore, and they underwhelmed a bit. But to be fair, that was also Matt Rule's team, and that was a complete joke, and he's one of the worst head coaches in NFL history. So it's a little unfair to Darnold there as well. So in my opinion, Vikings, you start Darnold the first few weeks, see how he does. If he's playing great, keep him in there. If not, try McCarthy. And in my opinion, I think either one of these guys, or I think the floor, I think, is still relatively high for this offense, just because of the surrounding cast for whatever quarterback's in there. And number 2, I just mentioned this team, and it pains me to say this as a Panthers fan, but I do think it's the Falcons. Now, here's the thing. The Falcons, I'm not exactly sure what their actual win projection is for this season, but honestly, I'm not even really worried about that. This could be the technical favorite in the NFC South, and I still feel like they're being underrated, even if they're the favorite. The reason I say that is because the NFC as a whole is pretty wide open, albeit there's definitely levels to it. Like, the 49ers, I think, are a level above the Falcons, for sure. But I still think the Falcons could compete on some level in the NFC, if that makes sense. So I think the NFC is very wide open. I think some of the teams at the very top, like the 49ers, are definitely a step above some of the guys below them, like, closest to them, I should say. But again, the Falcons, the reason I say I don't really care, even if they're projected to be the favorites in the NFC South, is because, for one, the division, not that good, so it's not saying a whole lot. Number 2 is the Falcons offense. Like, the ceiling on the Falcons offense is incredibly high, assuming Kirk Cousins can return back to his full health. Again, in rankings I've done lately with quarterbacks, I haven't had Kirk Cousins very high up there. The reason being is because I've said that Achilles injuries on a 35-year-old quarterback are a bit concerning. So I'm waiting for training camp to see him in some really, kind of full speed reps. And then I'm going to probably move Kirk Cousins up. I just want to see that there's no setbacks or anything like that. It's the only reason I don't have him higher. Because if Kirk Cousins can bounce back to his, normal level of play, this offense is instantly levels above, like, what the Falcons have had the past few years. Arthur Smith, Taylor Heineke, and Desmond Ridder have held this team back a lot. And as a Panthers fan, that's really the only reason the Panthers have actually been able to compete with this team. This team should have been way better than the Panthers the past few years, and they just haven't been. With Kirk Cousins in there, the way he operated in Minnesota, I mean, this guy gets the ball all over the field. Like, there's going to be plenty of targets on this offense. And so then when you look at the weapons on this offense, I mean, Kyle Pitts, he had a great rookie year, and then we just haven't seen it after that because it hasn't been consistent enough after that to actually get him the ball. So now all of a sudden with Kirk Cousins in there, it's like, man, Kyle Pitts' ceiling just got raised again. Drake London, who has been projected to really have like a breakout, I feel like the past few years now, I don't think he's really hit that potential yet. And I think Kirk Cousins can definitely unlock that potential for him. Darnell Mooney, I'm not super high on him. I wasn't really high on him in Chicago either as like a wide receiver 1. But a wide receiver 2, I think he can definitely fit that role, just fine. And Rondale Moore, he's very shifty, good after the catch, good playmaker. I think I wouldn't have him as like a B tier receiver. I'd have him more like C tier. But I wouldn't be surprised if he breaks like 300, even 400 yards this year, just from kind of after the catch stuff, making things happen. But the biggest thing for me too is Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. So first off, Algier, not a bad running back. The running game, Algier is, he's awesome. He had 1,000 yards his rookie year. Drafting Bijan wasn't really like a huge need for the Falcons, but it definitely takes their offense up a notch. And Bijan Robinson himself recently even said like this offense, how he can be utilized is similar to Christian McCaffrey in San Francisco. So I am seeing a huge year for Bijan Robinson coming up. I think he's going to be very active in the receiving game. He's amazing after the catch. He has great hands for a running back. He breaks a ton of tackles. Like, I'm just saying, and I hate to say this as a Panthers fan, but I think the Falcons are being underrated because, sure, they can be favorites in the NFC South, but I think we need to look at, like, the bigger picture in the entire NFC because this team can compete And definitely, not a Super Bowl, probably not NFC Championship, but they could definitely spoil some other really good team seasons down the line, at least in my opinion. Defensively, it's almost unfortunate because I feel like the Falcons were in prime position to even, strengthen their defensive line this past draft, and they take Penix, which is just, I don't understand that pick. And Falcons fans, if you do, you don't have to try and convince me down below and comment. If you can, if you want to, but I don't get it. When Dallas Turner's there, when Byron Murphy II's there, when Laiatu Latu is there, I mean, take the edge rusher. That's your weakness. You need a presence on the edge, and you don't address it at all. It's kind of mind-blowing to me. But despite that, though, for the secondary, like, getting Jessie Bates last year, if the Falcons turn out to be like a 10-11 win team in the next 2 years, especially from their defensive play, Jessie Bates and getting him in free agency is probably going to be one of the biggest moves that actually end up getting them there. He was phenomenal last season. I don't see it being any different this season. You still have AJ Terrell as well. This is a secondary that I think is they're going to make plays because even now your head coach, he's a relatively defensive-minded head coach from the Rams. I cannot remember his name, so I'm really sorry off the top of my head, but it's a very, very good defensive-minded head coach to where it's like, this defense is already much better last year. I feel like it's only going to take a step. I think you are going to be kind of capped off at a certain point. If you had got an edge rusher, like an elite edge rusher in the draft, maybe we even raise that ceiling more. But regardless, the Falcons' defense was a weakness for them the past couple seasons. They've addressed that, and it's become much better. And I feel like it's just on the offense now to become consistent for this to be a very well-rounded team. And next might sound like a bit of a weird one, but I actually have the Seahawks here. And the reason is because the Seahawks, for one, I think are a very well-rounded team. I think they're always very competitive, but they're in a pretty tough division, so I think their record always shows them as being a bit worse what they really are. I think it's definitely strange without Pete Carroll there. It's going to be really weird adjusting to that for sure. But I do think the benefits they now have, I bring in this new head coach, a very offensive-minded head coach at that. Like Geno Smith, is he, the best in the league by any means? No, absolutely not. But he's a serviceable quarterback who you can trust to consistently get the ball to your weapons. And that's where I think the Seahawks ceiling is actually a bit higher than what people might think. Because for one, DK Metcalf, very big play receiver. He's one of those guys where, he gets a slant, he can be gone, 50 yards all of a sudden. Lockett, who's one of the most reliable and underrated wide receivers in the entire NFL, in my opinion. And then Jackson Smith-Njigba, who had a bit of an underwhelming rookie season compared to what he may have been projected to have. But I think in year 2, this guy can totally show out. I think he showed flashes last season. I think he just needed more reps, to be honest. I mean, you're still sitting below, well, not really sitting, but you're still, having to compete with Metcalf and Lockett for targets. So I understand why maybe his stats weren't, jumping off the page. But Jackson Smith-Njigba, I think, has a very high ceiling. I think as Lockett is now approaching the tail end of his career, Jackson Smith-Njigba's role is only going to get better. I'm just going to say JSN now, just so I don't keep saying that. I think JSN's role is only going to get bigger for him, and I do think he can be a very good complement to DK Metcalf and become one of the better wide receiver duos in the entire NFL. I think his ceiling is relatively high, and honestly, I trust Geno to be able to get him close to that potential, honestly. Other than that, you still have Noah Fant at tight end, and the offensive line, I'm honestly not totally sure how this is really perceived league-wide. I know Charles Cross was, I think, a bit of a good pick a couple of years ago. I'm not sure how he's progressed, so last I heard he was decent. If I'm incorrect about that, you can let me know down below. But I do think regardless of that, the Seahawks ceiling is relatively high compared to what it might look like with guys like Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet as well. And even Kenny McIntosh. I mean, this running back room is very, very good. At least in my opinion, it's a very deep running back room. So, if the passing game is not there, you can take the pressure off Geno, get the ball to Kenneth Walker, get the ball to Zach Charbonnet. I think there's a lot of options on this offense, and I'm excited to see how much different it looks now with the new head coach in there. And also, I had to check, so I just could not think of his name. Mike Macdonald's the head coach. I'm sorry, I just could not come up with that whenever I was talking. And then defensively for the Seahawks, you re-signed Leonard Williams, which I think is a very nice move. You got him mid-season, I believe, last season or the season before. I think it was last season, though. So you make sure you re-sign him. I think it's a great move. Very good defensive lineman there. You still have, I can't even find, Tyreek Woolen. I'm not sure if he changed his name to just Reek Woolen, I guess. I honestly didn't know that, but you still have him, who had a great rookie season for being like a 5th or 6th round pick. I think it was a little bit of a regression last year, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think he got bad, but it wasn't like at the same level as his rookie year. Still, though, I don't think you really worry about that. I think he's still a great corner. He showed he can be a great corner. Secondary wise, too, Julian Love as well. Like the Seahawks defense, again, and that's how I've really seen this entire team. It is very well rounded. There's not a lot of guys that are gonna like jump off the page per se, but there's also like not a ton of like guys that you're like scared to death for them to be in the game where it's like, oh, we have to get him out, we have to replace him immediately. Of course, there's holes and there's weaknesses like any team would have, but I feel like the Seahawks are fairly well rounded. I do think it hurts them being in a division where you have the 49ers and the Rams as well, and even the Cardinals coming up now too. Like it's gonna be very competitive, but like if we're at week 15, week 16, and when seeding for the playoffs really comes into play, the Seahawks are gonna make it very tough in their divisional opponents. They're gonna be very competitive all year in their division. I do think that they have the potential to be like a 10-win team, but I do think because of how competitive their division is, they likely won't hit that ceiling. But I do think that if it does all come together, like I think it's definitely possible for them to, they have a much higher ceiling than what might be thought of the Seahawks. And then actually staying in that same division, next I have the Cardinals. I feel like the Cardinals are being very underrated, more so on offense than anything else, but still, I gotta have them on this list. You have Kyler Murray, who I feel like it's been almost forgotten how good he really is when he's healthy, despite all of the short jokes and the Call of Duty jokes. And like, look, Kyler Murray, when healthy, is one of the better dual threat quarterbacks in the entire NFL. He really does elevate the guys around him. He makes things happen. He extends plays very, very well. James Conner, who is a very good running back, just very reliable, very tough, does usually find himself injured now and then, but still, I think he's a great running back. You also you draft Trey Benson, who I think is a great running back as well, so I'm interested to see him in year one. But despite that, let's start with Marvin Harrison Jr. Obviously, I'm sure you know who he is if you're watching this video. Like, I'm sure you know who he is. But still, he really sets this wide receiver room up a notch from where they were even just last year. He's one of the more hyped up wide receiver prospects in the past few years. He's one of the more complete wide receiver prospects within the past few years. I see him being an instant, wide receiver one, day one, huge impact guy. And Michael Wilson, this is someone who had a very solid rookie year last year, although no one really cared because it was the Cardinals and they were terrible. But he seemed to be pretty good. And I think a full season with Kyler Murray, he might get to that like 700, even maybe 800 yard mark because he showed that even under not great circumstances, he could still put up decent numbers. And that was as a rookie. And then Zay Jones, just kind of like a journeyman guy. He's been in quite a few teams now, but he is a relatively reliable wide receiver 3. So honestly, I don't mind that for the Cardinals either. And then Trey McBride, like, this is someone who I think is honestly, we're starting to see, like, just how good this guy can be. His rookie year was like, yeah, okay. Last year was a bit better, and then now it's like, with Kyler Murray in there, another full offseason with Kyler Murray. I think Trey McBride showed, honestly, a lot of promise last year, a lot of flashes. I'm excited to see him this year. So, in my opinion, very dynamic offense, very dynamic skill group. Offensive line, you've tried to prioritize protecting Kyler Murray. Like you draft Paris Johnson a year or so ago. You get Jonah Williams in free agency this past year, so I understand they're trying to prioritize that. And hopefully, that can actually come to fruition because I know it's been an issue with that O-line. But still, I feel like the ability that this offense has, it's just very dynamic. I've said it before, but if you think about it, like they have a very strong rushing game with Murray, Conner, and Benson in there. But then Murray's ability to extend plays with now a wide receiver group with Marvin Harrison Jr., who I think will be very, very good. Michael Wilson, who I think is very underrated. Trey McBride, who I think will be like a top 10 to 15 tight end this year. Like, I think it's honestly going to be pretty good, especially James Conner out of the backfield. This offense, I think, is very underrated. I think people have forgot how good a healthy Kyler Murray really is. And the guys I have in this roster, I think on paper, they might not jump off the page, but they're all very sneaky good in my opinion. Now, the Cardinals' defense is a bit of a different story. Their offense is what really makes me be excited for them because I think the ceiling is relatively high for the offense. At the end of the day, the Cardinals will probably not crack 6 wins. They're in a tough division, like I just said with the Seahawks. And, the Cardinals are definitely a step below the Seahawks, who are, I think, in my opinion, the third best team in that division. So it's going to be tough to get a lot of wins and let it amount to anything. The offense, I mean, and they're still rebuilding. That's the thing. It's like I'm excited for this team because you can see the pieces starting to fall into place. I think Jonathan Gannon showed that last year. You know, he has a vision for this team. He can make them compete. And I'm excited to see what he continues building there in Arizona. But defensively, you know, you got Budda Baker, Sean Murphy-Bunting, Zaven Collins, you know, Mac Wilson Sr., Zaire White. Like, other than that, it's a little questionable. I'm not gonna lie. At the end of the day, I'm very excited for the Cardinals. I think that they're gonna be an exciting team to watch, even if they don't get a lot of wins, because I think they're gonna be relatively competitive until their defense inevitably cracks because they just don't have the talent there. But still, I think a quite underrated team actually going into 2024. And then, in my opinion, the final underrated team going to 2024, which honestly I said in no particular order, but this might be number one for me, is the Colts. I have done quarterback rankings a few times now, and each time that I've had Anthony Richardson fairly high up there, people have commented like, you know, why is he up there so high? He barely played. But I'm telling you guys, this guy was seen as a very raw prospect, not being good at a whole lot of things other than like his physical attributes and as a runner and his arm strength. Everything else was seen as very inconsistent, had to be developed. In the limited time that he played, I understand it's a very small sample size. I totally get that. But he did not look to be as raw of a prospect as what was really presumed for him. He really seemed to have pretty consistent and decent accuracy. He was very good as a runner, incredible arm strength, although that was never in question whatsoever. So I'm really excited to see him now with a Shane Steichen offense, you know, for a full season, hopefully, where Shane Steichen has showed he can develop young dual threat quarterbacks. He did the same thing in Philadelphia with Jalen Hurts. I want to see him continue to work with Anthony Richardson, because if Richardson really hits his ceiling, this offense's potential is really through the roof, in my opinion. We've seen what Jonathan Taylor can do. No, he hasn't hit that mark, you know, after the past few years, but we've seen how good he can be when healthy. Trey Sermon, I think, is I think he's an okay running back too. I wouldn't say it's like a strong running back room. I think he's okay. You have Jonathan Taylor, though, who's an amazing running back. Michael Pittman Jr. is one of, if not the most underrated wide receiver in the entire NFL, in my opinion. You have him now with a potential franchise quarterback. Josh Downs, who had a very good rookie year, despite being with Gardner Minshew in a pretty disastrous Colts circumstances that they did turn into a pretty good season. He still performed quite well. You get A.D. Mitchell after he fell pretty far in the draft. He has a very high ceiling, good playmaker out of Texas. And even Jelani Woods at tight end, like this offense, I'm excited to see what they scheme up here, because Richardson can extend plays, he can run, he has a very big arm, and now you have a deep threat with A.D. Mitchell. You have kind of like a do-it-all guy, not the fastest, but with Michael Pittman Jr. And then Josh Downs, who I still think can do a little bit of everything, and he's still very, very young, so I want to see more from him as well. The Colts offense, though, to me, like the potential here is just absolutely through the roof. And then even defensively, DeForest Buckner for defensive line, Kwity Paye, both two honestly very good players, aren't talked about a ton. You have Zaire Franklin for middle linebacker, Juju Brents, who you drafted last year for cornerback, and also Julian Blackman in the safety room there. Like, this defense is very competitive. I will say, in my opinion, the Texans will probably, okay, let me rephrase that. I believe the Texans are the favorite to win the division. Personally, I would probably agree with that. But if any team is going to challenge them, I would say it's the Colts. I actually had them over the Jaguars at this point. Even though the Jaguars, I think, are somewhat, you know, underrated in their own right. But I think the Colts ceiling is higher, to be honest. They almost made it last year, you know, and that was in circumstances where they lost the guy they just drafted at quarterback for the whole season. Gardner Minshew steps in there, and honestly, like it turns out to be almost a playoff appearance. Like, it wasn't that bad of a year. So I think this year their ceiling is even higher. Richardson is, while he hasn't been shown, you know, he hasn't done a whole lot yet because he hasn't played a whole lot yet. I think the team around him is even better this year. And I think he's now had a full offseason to, you know, rehab, just learn even more. I'm really excited to see the Colts this year. I think, in my opinion, this is the most underrated team going into 2024. And if you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to subscribe down below for more videos like this. I do a ton of NFL content. And also, comment down below who, in your opinion, is the most underrated team going into 2024. Did I name them in this video? Did I not name them? Is one of these teams, you know, do you guys think they're going to be bad? I don't know. Let me know down below. Leave a like in the video. I would really appreciate it. It helps me out a ton. Under to 1,000 subscribers, so I would appreciate all the support there. But yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.